Support for the Couples Council comes from Mercier Wellness and Consulting. Their purpose is to equip you with the right skills for a happy and healthy relationship. Schedule your consultations now. For more information, visit mercierwellness.com. Mercier Wellness and Consulting. Small steps, big changes.
This podcast is not a substitute for therapy. Please consult a licensed professional for your mental health needs. Now on with the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Couples Council. I'm your host, Dr. Jameson Mercier. And today, and I know I say this all the time, but today I have a treat for you guys and a treat for me because this is someone, so the treat is a person. This is someone whom I've gotten to know quite well and someone who I enjoy speaking time with. We started out as colleagues, and now I'd like to think that we've grown to be good friends. You know, I don't know if I've crossed the threshold to BFF yet, but I'd like to think we're good friends. I'm talking about Mia Terrazzes. She's a dear friend of mine. So she's our guest today, and we're going to be talking about a particular subject related to couples that a lot of people don't like to talk about, but hey, we're diving in, right, Mia?
Yes, I'm here. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, say hello to the people. How you doing?
Hello, people. How are you? I'm excited to be here with my friend and former colleague.
Yeah, I've been trying to get her on the show.
I think I've been trying to force my way into your show.
And you're here.
And I'm here. I made
it.
it.
So you've successfully kicked the door down.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're talking about relationships, obviously, because that's what we do. But we're addressing relationships in the context of breakups. As you can tell by the subject of this episode, after the love is gone, right? Relationships don't always last. And we've said this in previous episodes and even last season. When we enter a relationship, be it a marriage or a romantic relationship, we do so in the hopes that it will last. Now, last could be for, I don't know if I can say forever, but years. It could lead into something much more serious. Definitely, we don't enter them thinking, at least if we're serious, most people don't enter relationships expecting just, a few weeks, but not all relationships last, right? So today, Mia is gracious enough to come and join us and talk about this topic and, what happens after relationships end. And so today, Mia and I, we're going to talk about this, just what happens after the love is gone. And there's some vulnerability here, there's some sharing and some openness, but I'd like to think that my listeners are safe. We can chat. Okay. Feel free to email your comments and questions, and we'll address them at that point. So, Mia, you were in a relationship that recently ended?
Yes, it ended in the beginning of the year, so about January.
Officially
ended, yes.
Okay. And you and I have had, little conversations about that whole process.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that we discussed, we've concluded that might be beneficial for people to, for those who listen to the podcast, they might be able to benefit from, particularly what that process is like.
Right.
One thing I always say is, relationships don't necessarily end when we walk away, but it's a bit of a process at times.
Yes.
And so I guess you can pick up wherever you'd like and tell us a little bit about your process in that.
Sure. Okay. Well, yeah. I will share that I was in an on and off again relationship for 15 years, which is a very long time.
15
Um,
years.
yes, a lot of life happens in 15 years. And the process for each time it's on and off is very, it can be really challenging, especially with how emotionally how things are happening for you. Not only
Mhm.
that, but also um, with relationships with other people, not just your relationship with that significant other. So, there's after the love is gone, I kind of think like, does it go away, or have we just found a way to make peace with something, um, and then move forward? I know a lot of times,
Mm.
we get very philosophical after relationships, so we
Yeah.
become very much like, I learned a valuable lesson, I can move forward. So how I moved forward after being on and off with someone for so long, um, was a bit of a challenge,
Mm.
and definitely a huge process, of for myself mainly.
Okay.
Uh, so, um, is that what you're kind of going for? Is just
Y-
what the process was, or when I?
Yeah. Yeah. So, for example,
Mhm.
in the past, so before I married my lovely wife, Herdine Mercier, hey babe, um, I was in previous relationships and breakups. So the process of breaking up, we had an idea, at least I had an idea, you know, and one of the things about relationships, rarely do both people want it to end at the same time.
Mhm.
So there were relationships where I was trying to hold on, please, baby, please don't leave me.
Yeah, it's a really great point. It's a
Yeah.
very great point. And I want to piggyback off of that because it just made me think of something. And when I think about something that's been on and off for so long,
Mm,
um, each time it's on or off, it's because somebody's needs weren't being met, or somebody was getting something out of it that the other person wasn't. But there was kind of this undertone of familiarity, this
okay.
undertone of, whatever it was for the other person. I know for me, there's this really daunting uh, emotion or feeling, which is I don't want to be alone. And I
Okay.
know, and I know this person really well. And
Mm,
so I don't want to be surprised by too many things. There's a lot going on.
right.
And I know this. I know this person. I know these feelings. I've navigated through them so many times, picked myself back up from them so many times, that I get this. And, part of that too, when I finally was like, I don't want to know these feelings anymore. I don't want to know what it feels like when somebody's not overly involved in something, and I just make it okay because I don't want to be
Alone.
alone.
Right.
Or at this point, I'll share I'm 31 years old. And so 15 years is a really long time, from 15 to 31. And
Mm-hmm.
so you get to a point in your life where you're like, okay, are we going even in the same directions? Do we want the same things? And reevaluating that as well, and wanting something more. And like you were saying, like, rarely is it that there's somebody that um, wants isn't sorry. What did tell me again what you
No, I was
said? 'Cause I
saying
lost it.
rarely did does both people agree that okay, it's a mutual separation, because there were times I was
Yes.
saying I was trying to hold on, and then there were other breakups in the past where I was ready to go, and she was like, "No, don't leave."
Yes. So in this particular moment, it was really interesting because I think, in my situation, I'll be really transparent here. There was a lot of leaving on his part, and it wasn't for me. For
Mm,
me, I was very invested. I wanted to make sure that things were going well, with him and taking care of him. And then this time it was more certain, and I was more certain, more confident in my decision of saying, this just isn't right for me. And we had, while you're going through relationships, you have your ups and downs. And during one of our down points, he was like, I think our relationship is perfect. And I was like, holy moly, like, you think our relationship is perfect? Like, there's a serious issue here.
Because clearly you were not
definitely, I agree with that.
Yeah, because at the time he tells you things are perfect.
Yeah. Exactly. So, so when he said that, I mean, there's certain little things that go on along the course of a relationship, and there's moments in the course of your relationship where you can get uncomfortable with whatever somebody is saying or what they're doing, and you just kind of, you kind of do this self-doubt thing. Well, am I overreacting? Is it really that big of a deal? And, for me during this time, and I chose to really listen to what those feelings were and why I was having those feelings, and say my feelings are just as valid as his. And that was really important, because it wasn't all about him. It was about me too. There's two individuals in one relationship. So listening more to what my feelings were trying to tell me, instead of trying to kind of, make it something it wasn't, I guess.
Okay.
My feelings.
So
dismiss them.
Okay, so you mentioned that fear of perhaps being loneliness might have been a contributing factor to the on and off, on again and off again. Were there other reasons that perhaps led you to stay so long, or come back as often and reconnect as often as you guys did?
I think probably the main reason was just not being sure of myself and trusting myself. And, there's so many things that happen in relationships that affect other parts of your life. I know for me personally, I have a very high stress job at some, points, and coming home and feeling extra stressed, we've talked about that, was a huge indicator, for me. And, here I would be preaching this to other people, to take care of yourself and make sure you're setting boundaries and, whatever. I wasn't doing that. And so, the boundary thing was really challenging for me, because it's really easy to say, I want to set these boundaries, this is what I want to do, but then the emotional piece comes into it, and it's like, well, I don't want to be alone, and oh, well, he was really nice, this time around, not nice, but like, we're really getting along. And so, you kind of let that overshadow what you might have been thinking for days.
Okay.
So I think, that self-esteem, that self-love, taking care of yourself, really was something that I didn't do well. I was very busy taking care of him and his feelings and this idea of this relationship.
So 15 years, and you said you're early 30s now. That suggests you were 15, 16, 17 when you guys started dating.
Yes.
And so you said a lot of life happens in 15 years.
Yes.
Tell me about, I guess, that growth process within the context of a relationship, right? Because those years are vital years as far as who you are.
Yes.
And what you want. And to be in a committed relationship at 15, 16, 18, 20, I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you and me both. I think, here's the thing. I think that we all, have an idea of what a relationship is supposed to look like.
Mm.
We get a lot of information about relationships from a lot of different sources. That could be, what we watch, what we read, what we see with our parents, with our family, with our friends' relationships. And I feel like there's like this kind of natural comparison, I think, that comes into play with that. But yes, a lot of life in the sense of like committed relationships from 17 to 31, it looks different. You have your puppy dog kind of love, which was what I had with this person. That first love, it was
Mm.
very, very intense. And I think that sometimes can be replicated too in other people's relationships when you first meet somebody and it's all about them and it's almost intoxicating and you kind of want to find that spark or keep that spark alive. Um, and then over time, you grow into different versions of yourself, different seasons of yourself. Um, for me, college, going away to college, we also had a long distance relationship.
Okay.
So we had a lot of variables to our relationship where we kind of chalked it up to, okay, well, we were young at this stage. We didn't know what it meant. Now we're ready to try at this stage and still not really kind of figuring that out because we didn't really know who individually each one of us were or, who we were, who we wanted to be, what we wanted to accomplish. And I think that sentiment kind of, reverberates no matter how old you are in whatever relationship. If you don't have any personal goals, any personal things to add to your relationship, it's going to oftentimes be one-sided.
Mm. So following that vein of kind of being one-sided, you said earlier that much of the leaving or the reason you guys were separating was due to him. He did a lot of that. Did he also do a lot of the coming back, or did you kind of drive that train?
Great question. It was him. It was him. It was a lot of him coming back, and it was then my opportunity to be like, wow, I guess our love isn't gone.
Okay, so
Um,
that's actually where I was.
and
So that's actually where I was gonna go with that, because if he did a lot of the
mhm,
leaving and a lot of the coming back, then what were you doing more or less?
mhm. Like when he left,
Right. He would leave and come back, and you were more or less like, okay.
I think I was just very confused because at the like I was saying before, like this concept or this idea of love and relationships is if you love something so much, you're able to like let it go and it comes back. How often have we heard that?
Mm,
Um, or, when you're really in love with somebody, you accept them for all their flaws and you accept them for who they are. And I think a lot of that was very convoluted in my brain as a young person. Because that then gave me the green light to accept some not so great behavior and kind of this pattern of coming and going. And like I said, just my family, they're all married for numbers of years, and you hear marriage is hard, marriage is difficult, commitment is hard, commitment is difficult. When you really love someone, you do everything you can to make that relationship work. And for me, the way I viewed relationships was, if I'm going to be in one, I'm going to be committed. So that's, but it got very, confusing. And, but I was saying it was just allowing that opportunity to kind of accept certain behaviors that were kind of, looking back at it, some pretty, big red flags.
mm. So, so what? It was either just some flawed logic or convoluted ideas, or did we just accept or make excuses for these red flags, or was it both?
I think it was both. I think it was both. I think it was what I, um, my perception of what a successful relationship looked like and what I had seen,
Mm-hmm.
um, and what I had heard. And then also, like you were saying, this idea as well.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I know the title of this show is After the Love is Gone,
Mhm.
but would you agree that when the relationship ended, the love was gone, or was it more, um, I may still love you, but this is not a healthy situation?
Yeah, exactly. I would say that. I would say that the love, isn't gone. I think you put it doesn't, I don't know, I think that person leaves a little bit of them within you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think the love changes. I think that the love then turns, internally, and I think you kind of have to have that self-love to say, this is something I'm not going to accept. These are some things I won't settle for. These are some things that I deserve, and I'm deserving of, and my feelings are important and they're valid. I still love this person. I love the journey I've had with this person, but at this point, I have to love me a little bit, and
Mm.
do what's right for me.
Yeah, yeah. That's the tough part, I guess, you know. And I wonder what it is that we can tell, women and men,
Mm-hmm.
just people in relationships that are similar to this one that you had, about navigating that, you know, because while it was complicated, or a complicated situation for you, it was more or less one on the lesser complex pieces, because you guys didn't have children
Right.
together. There isn't assets that are shared between the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people who are in some seriously, enmeshed or tangled situations,
Absolutely.
yet going
Absolutely.
through the same process. So, I mean, what do we begin to tell them about that process?
Well, I mean, I think here's what I think personally.
That's fine.
Um, I think that I think you start to know, um, after a while, like to say that, I didn't think that this was right for a long time, I think um, would be inaccurate. I think there were times in my relationship over this long period of time in my relationship where I was like, I don't know if I could really see this, or I really don't like that this is what they do. Um, I don't like how I feel. Mainly, it was I really don't like how I feel or how this person, um, handle certain situations,
Mm,
or me. I trust them. As you're in a relationship, you trust them with you and your feelings and your heart. And when you get that sense that you can't, or it's not a safe space for your emotions, or what you're feeling isn't valid, I think those are all things that, no matter what relationship you're in, are really, um, they're there for a reason, and they're
yeah.
there to be explored. And I talked to a bunch of my friends who are in marriages who, and I work with couples
Mm,
and parents a lot. And one of the biggest things that we often talk about is this, um, communication is
mm,
like the death can be the death of a relationship, no matter if you're married or in, just a committed relationship. And if you don't feel heard or safe, or haven't found a way to say what you need to say where your partner will understand, those are some things that I would start with. I would explore there. And
yeah.
when I started doing that within my own relationship with this past one, it really led me to a lot of introspection, a lot of reflection, and like,
Mm.
whoa, okay, this is where I need to start.
Yeah, now that's so the decision to do that is a scary decision, right? Because once you start asking questions, you are confronted with answers potentially you may not be prepared for.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and some people already know the answers, so they just don't ask the questions.
Right. And to be honest, this relationship was going to a more serious one, a more permanent one, a more, I knew if I stayed in this situation, it would have been for years, um, in my thought process, because our relationship was so perfect to someone else. um, and I kind of had to essentially kind of grieve that.
Mm.
I had to kind of let that go. I had to go through my emotions of grieving this relationship, because you spend so much time with this person. It feels like a huge loss. It feels like I'm missing something. I'm losing something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, you know, all the while, the losing part was myself in this relationship, which is what it started with.
Wow. Wow.
Was two
Okay.
individual people coming together for a relationship.
How long would you say that process of losing yourself was happening, or you felt it went on when doing your reflection? Because that's big.
Yeah, like how long was that? What did that happen?
Yeah.
I think when you start ignoring your feelings about something, or you quiet yourself to be in a relationship, is when
Mm.
it begins. Because in safe, committed relationships, I feel, this is just my interpretation, but in safe
Mm-hmm.
ones, you want the other person to be their best self. You want to be able to bring that out of that other person, and that person to do that for you. And part of that is creating this safe space for the ugly emotions to come out, and also, the really happy ones. It's not just a one-sided thing. But I do feel like when you start to kind of stifle those feelings of discomfort, or those feelings of not being heard, or not being communicated with, or not being, my feelings not being valued, um, you start to create this foundation of, it's not safe here.
Mm.
And when you start to do that, then you then start to do that in other ways, in other years, and in other times of your relationship. Like, I know how this person's going to act here, so I'm not going to say anything. Or I want to avoid this argument, so I'm just not going to say anything. There's a reason why it keeps coming up.
Yeah. Now let's just be clear. This was this a pattern you yourself kind of initiated, or was it something that he did?
Um, in terms of the, like, stifling feelings,
Right.
I think it was both. I think
Okay.
it was, I think there were times that he didn't want to say anything. He didn't want to talk about certain things. And then
Mhm.
here I was like, you have to talk about it. You have to talk about it. Um, but I think it was on both ends. I think it got to a point for me where I was just kind of like, he's not listening to me. So um,
So
it's
why
just
even,
pointless.
yeah, why
Why
even
even
try?
bother?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Okay. Because again, in relationships, where, love just goes out the window, there are people who get into those patterns and those habits, um, and their partner is not. I've seen relationships where they end not because of the other partner, but because of the individual themselves. They get into these destructive
Mhm.
patterns, but in turn
Yes.
blame the other.
Right. Absolutely. Right.
Okay. In this journey, this relationship, were there people telling you, hey, I don't quite see why, you got out once, why get back in? Just people
Oh,
advising.
yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's another thing, is you're going to get a lot of, not necessarily solicited advice from
Mm-hmm.
friends and
Mm-hmm.
family, which can make the decision of what you're going to do, stay or go, a lot more difficult. Um, but yes, there were a lot of people that were, for me, my family, after, the go around the third time, were like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my goodness, what the heck? Then you had some cheerleaders that were like, you guys just haven't figured it out yet, or, this is going on. You guys are still young, that kind of thing. Um, and then my friends, my poor, sweet, sweet, beautiful friends, were just like over it at this point. Like the same kinds of issues. And that's truly what it was. You talk about the same issues over and over and over again, because you really haven't accepted them and you haven't really done anything about it. So you still get into this loop of the same thing. And then, you're talking to your friends, well, he did this again. Well, he sure did.
Yeah, what'd you expect is what they say.
Right, exactly. Well, we could have told you that. At that point, you could have told yourself that.
Right.
You know how it is.
That whole friend thing is interesting because, it can save us a whole lot of heartache and a whole lot of loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
But conventional wisdom is to keep people out of your relationships,
Right.
and then the question then becomes, one, do you keep everybody out? Two, if you decide to let some of the advice filter in, when do you let it filter in? Because there are times where it's actually valid and you should. I don't like to use the word should, but it would be beneficial.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. Can we make any sense of that?
Well, I think for in relationships, like, letting people in is going to be, I think it's just a personal thing, like your family, how much you're going to let them in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that if that's true to you, um, then, a partner that can respect that, I think, is important within reason, because you also want to respect your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if family and friends are like a huge part for you, where, you that's a way that you handle situations, is they're your people, then I wouldn't, a partner that doesn't want you to do that is something to consider. Um, but I do think, like, within reason, what as the minute you open your relationship up to other people is the minute you give them the opportunity to comment on it.
Right.
So just being aware of just that in general, and just taking their advice with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, like I was saying, what are you talking to them about, over and over and over again? Does it happen to be the same thing? Because if it is the same thing, again, something to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a lot of reflection during this relationship. For me personally, I like to journal.
Me too.
um, so while I was journaling, I happened to be able to have like a collection of situations that were going on that I noticed started to become a pattern. And same things I was getting really upset about. And then I was able to kind of say, huh, well, what am I going to do with that? Now you have the knowledge. Now, what are you
Right.
going to do with it?
Right.
um, and I guess that would be a point for you, or you, the collective you, to
Mm-hmm.
decide kind of, are you going to continue to choose, this person, this relationship, and continue to journal all your feelings out? Or are you going to be like, oh, my partnership, I should be able to, talk about it freely?
Mm.
And if I can't, then something to explore.
Yeah, yeah, that's the crossroads. And, while your decision was, this is not going to work, there are those who say, well, I can deal with this, I can stay in this, and they stay for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has their own motivations, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's necessary all the time to be, when you're really mad at your partner, to just, you know, lay it on them. I mean, I think you
Mm-hmm.
can definitely journal and get that aggression or that whatever feeling that is out. But I do think, the bigger point was, if it continues to be the same thing that you're just not making peace with, or you can't, that's just something, that's where I started.
Mm.
And it was like, do I want to continue this relationship knowing that this is going to continue to be an issue? Because whatever you're not changing, you're choosing.
Mm. I like that. Whatever you're not changing, you're choosing. Yeah, not everybody sees it that way, though.
Yep, that's true. That's how I saw it. That's how I was, able to kind of do what I needed to do for myself in this relationship.
Okay. So, in choosing yourself,
Mm-hmm.
are there any feelings of guilt?
Sometimes, absolutely, there were. I mean, I knew, this person like the back of your hand, and we were living together. So where is he going to live? What is he going
Mm.
to do? Um, there was definitely that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And so well, in the past, the on and off again and on again, was that driven by those feelings of guilt?
Um, I think that maybe it was.
And so this time it was just a different decision.
Yeah, it was just a different decision. I feel like it was a older and wiser
Yeah.
kind of decision.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because the guilt thing can be hard to overcome for a lot of people. And I'm just thinking about individuals again in this situation where they're on this roller coaster. And if it's not, the familiarity that keeps them in the same loop, it's the feelings of guilt
Mm-hmm.
that keeps them in the same loop, or, that sense of obligation. Um,
Yeah,
just having to navigate those emotions.
it's a strong emotion to try to overcome. Is this feeling of guilt, or even like shame at some points too. Like,
Mm.
here you go again, especially when you're on a relationship that's off and on. It's just kind of like, here they go again. You have to kind of face that reality.
Wow.
um, and the reality of your decision. Like you said, there will be some guilt that might come up for you, or some shame or some embarrassment that, this, yeah, this happened again. Here I am.
Yeah.
Um, sometimes I see that with people that have failed marriages, more than one. There's that guilt, there's that shame, that embarrassment,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
having to explain or feeling like they have to explain things to people who don't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, that can be difficult.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think of people who have very public relationships and public marriages, celebrities and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, political officials.
Yeah.
And we don't think about them necessarily in those terms, but I'd imagine um, a very similar process, just much more under a lot more scrutiny.
Yes. I mean, I couldn't imagine having to
No
see
way.
someone you don't
No
want to
way.
see. Because, like you said, there is that, or like we are talking about, there is like this grieving process that kind of goes on.
Right. And you're almost unable to go through that.
Yeah, it's
You're
very
so,
difficult. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
But also, I just had a thought that grieving process can even be prolonged because of your family and friends that keep bringing things up.
This is true. This is true. And I'll tell you this. We kind of joked about this a little bit. Um, I've had friends who've been in relationships, and I've, kind of fallen in love with their partners. And then when I ask about Johnny or Susan or
Oh yeah.
whomever, they say, "Oh, we're not together anymore." And I grieve that
Yeah.
that relationship. And as you said it now, and I realize in grieving their relationship, I kind of prolong their grief, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. Or even the simplest things is like, oh well, we always knew you could do better, or something like that. It still is a little bit of a shot to the heart. You're
Yeah.
like, well, maybe.
Yeah. The things our friends say to us when they're trying to be supportive.
It's that weird, that sweet spot where even when someone passes away and people don't really know what to say, or they're like, oh
Hmm.
well, they were this, they were sick, they were this. In a relationship, it's like, well, he wasn't really this way for you, he wasn't the right fit for you, and it's kind of
Right.
like you're going through those emotions and that loss of that relationship. And
Hmm.
it really is kind of like grief. It comes and it goes, and you have that self-doubt, like, oh gosh, did I make the right decision for myself? Did you know I didn't have any children with this person, but there was conversation about that, and this whole idea of this life that you're letting go of. So that alone can be really difficult to part with.
I
um,
imagine. I imagine.
so that's definitely a challenge, and that's when you kind of immerse yourself in like things that maybe you weren't doing in the relationship, not for anything bad, but because there's compromise in relationships. So there might, if you're going out to movies with your significant other versus, I don't know, crocheting, that's one of the things you like to do, and you've
Right.
substituted them, then you kind of go back to crocheting.
Yeah. No, you crochet the hell out of a
So,
mean sweater and a sock or a scarf.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So definitely.
Okay. So again, to borrow the title, After the Love Is Gone, it isn't that love is gone and dead, but you said a moment ago, it changes, and there's this choosing to love yourself. Um there's this, there's life after when the love is gone, is I guess the overall theme I'm picking up here.
Yeah. There's a lot of life after love. There's a lot of self-love after a relationship.
Yeah.
And it's important, and it's important work. It's probably the hardest work, I think. You kind of have to come head to head with the decisions that you made, and then the decision that you made to end this relationship. Um,
Mhm.
all the dust settles, and there you are covered in the dust. Like, what the heck do I do with it now? Where do I start?
Right.
Um, and that in itself is a slow process. And I think just um, being patient with yourself is really important, and just getting loved up by all those people that maybe you didn't get to see
Yeah.
as often.
Yeah, the ones waiting in the sidelines to well, either for the relationship to end or for a chance to love on you.
Yeah. Exactly. um, but I mean, there is a lot that goes on after a relationship, and I love that whole concept, because you see like women, some in particular, that they get their hair cut. People always make like memes about it,
Hmm.
like a
Hmm.
woman is out of a relationship and she gets a fresh cut, a fresh do.
Mm.
um, and then you see, girls, my neighbor, she was out of a relationship, so she said she's back at the gym, she's doing her thing, she's eating healthy.
Yeah.
you know it, so much of it becomes about you, and that is the part that was lost a little bit within your relationship.
Yeah, I often tell people, if we're able to maintain that while in the relationship, imagine what that might look like.
Right,
You know,
right,
it,
exactly.
it's good anytime you can do it. I just, think about that.
Mhm.
Hmm. Wow, wow. Any other gems, any other tidbits? Because I'm just noticing the time, and you and I can talk forever.
We can. We can talk a long time. Any other gems? No, I think we've hit them all. I mean, like I said, what you're not changing, you're choosing, and that has a lot to do with like yourself as well. Like and then making sure that you're taking care of yourself in whatever fashion that looks like for an individual.
Mm,
Um, and like I said, start there where start in the moments where you feel discomfort. Why? Why are you feeling that way in your relationship? Um, or, take notice on how many of the same things you're bringing to the table with your friends, and start there.
yeah. Yeah, I definitely think there are individuals listening who are taking notes, and who are just, they're at that crossroad.
Yeah.
It's the second or third or fourth time, and he or she wants me back. And what do I do? And if you're in that situation and you're hearing this podcast, maybe replay this podcast, or if you know someone who's hemming and hawing and can't quite seem to make a decision, or maybe you're that friend who's like, again, just send them this podcast. A lot of times, that just seems to do that's much better than us kind of getting in the middle of it, you know
Yeah.
because they might make up and fall back in love, and then here you are on
Front row at their wedding, standing next to her.
and you've said all those things.
Uh-huh.
So but Mia, thank you for breaking through the windows and getting in on the podcast.
Thank you for finally having me
Oh
here.
man, no, listen, it's a treat, and I will leave an open invitation, right? Anytime you're ready to come back, um, maybe to update us, or maybe just some stuff you remembered and you care to share. Um, I'd love to have you back.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was my conversation with my dear friend Mia Terrazzes, a clinical social worker. I hope you found it beneficial. Mia and I, we've known each other for a few years now, and it, you know, it is. I like her perspective on relationships. Being married totally changes your perspective on relationships. Your marriage, being married to this individual, but apart from um, what apart from talking to someone, you don't have much of an insight about what they're going through. So you have an idea, but to have someone come and sit and be vulnerable and just kind of lay it all on the table for you, that that was big of her. And so I hope you guys appreciated it as much as I do. Okay. Um, Let us know what you think about the show. Get in touch with me at Dr. Jameson Mercier on Instagram. Hit us up on the website, mercierwellness.com. Let us know in the comments. Leave us a review, and share it with somebody. We always say sharing is caring, and we'd really appreciate you continuing to spread the word. Thank you for joining me on this episode, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I look forward to having you again for another episode of the Couples Council. Bye now.
Hey everybody! Thank you for listening to our mom and dad.
If you like them as much as we do, then click subscribe and leave a comment. But now they have to go because it's family time.
So go practice what you heard, and we'll catch you on the next episode.